This week marks the middle of our study. I can't believe how fast the time is going. My prayer for you this week, as you think about the doctrine of humanity in chapter 5 and the doctrine of sin in chapter 6, is that you will realize how incredibly practical theology can be. An understanding of how and why God made us and the devastating consequences of our rebellion against His plan brings clarity to a confusing, chaotic, and complex world. Let's see what Emily learned in chapter 5.
Here we are at chapter 5. After navigating and reading through the theology of who God is, what He is like, and what the Bible is, we get to take a look at who we are, the doctrine of humanity. In some ways, this has been a challenge for me because it's so much easier to focus my attention outwards versus taking a closer look at myself. There were so many great takeaways for me in this chapter, but mostly it had me thinking and evaluating where I place my value and identity. If I was asked to tell someone about myself, my answer would likely be something like, my name is Emily. I'm 36 years old. I'm married with 4 young kids. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I drive a minivan, and generally speaking, I am drowning. That's not a joke. This current season of life can tend to be very repetitive. Days are filled with taxiing kids, piles of laundry, dishes, making meals. There's little thanks and almost zero recognition from them. And there's a strong temptation in this daily grind to find my identity and value in what I might have done well or accomplished. But even more often than that, there's frustration, irritation, and disappointment if I don't meet my own standards. While all of these things are about me and what I do, it doesn't answer the reality of who I really am at the core, who God says I am at the simplest level, which should be the loudest voice and impact me the most. God declares that I am His creation, made by Him in His image, that I and every human are endowed with divine dignity, value, and worth. Every single person bears God's image. That's amazing. However, too often I forget that I was created by God, made in His image, with a task of representing God to all creation. And right now, the creation that is right in front of me 90% of the time are my own kids. Losing sight of this biblical understanding of who I am has a direct impact on how they see Christ in me. This chapter has helped remind me that even if I am failing in my own standards of what it means to be a good mom, wife, or friend, my true identity, the identity I have been given by God, cannot be changed and is secure. It can't be earned or lost. And that reminder brings me so much peace. Jen Wilkins says it perfectly. The doctrine of anthropology reminds us that we are not our own. Another has crafted our frame. Another has charted our course. He is trustworthy and true. And in the light of His truth, we at last become the humans we were created to be.
And now Haley's going to share from chapter 6.
I'm talking about chapter 6 today, which is the doctrine of sin. And I wanted to start off with the definition of sin that the book has, and that is any rebellion against God and His created order. And I really liked the part about a rebellion against His created order because I hadn't heard it be put that way before, and order produces peace, and order and peace are part of God's character. So when we disrupt order and peace, then we are disrupting God's character, and that's sinful. So I liked that. I also was convicted by the thought of that when we are sinful, we are rivaling God rather than representing God, and we are acting as if we are, and believing that we are wiser than God. Even though we may not feel like we're wiser, our choice to sin is acting as if we're wiser than God. So those were some convicting points that stuck out to me. And I also thought I would answer the first question in the back of the chapter, which was, how have you seen the catastrophic effects of sin in your life, and what circumstances make you long for the end of sin? When I read that question, the first thing that I thought about was how I'm drawn to the image of the garden and the landscape and nature in its pure form. And I think I've always been drawn to that because I work in the outdoors and I see nature every day in its hindered state, and so imagining what it was like before sin tainted it is something that seems almost unimaginable to me, but also a really cool thought. And I think when I think about nature, and specifically in farming, sometimes there's there's drought, or there's storm, or there's sickness, or there's weeds, and we as humans believe that we can do things to fix those problems. We can spray and then the weeds will go away, or we can water and then they'll be resistant to drought, but there's always more. And so sin is always present in our fallen world. And so I think remembering God sent a Savior and that Jesus is our deliverance from sin is a really hopeful thought about sin. And so I think that it's also very reflective of our hearts, of my heart, in that sometimes there's always sin and pain and broken parts of my heart that we feel like we can fix and that we can do different things to fix our hearts. But in reality, God sent his son Jesus to save us from our sin. And so I think that we can draw on our own selves, but we actually need an external Savior to save us from our sin. So in the end, we have hope and deliverance, and those are my thoughts on the chapter.